Oh, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. I hope that you're doing well, and I hope that wherever you are is doing good for you, my friends. This is episode 68, and it is a big one, a really, really, really big one. Now, before I get into the intro, I do have to go and put this live on the Facebooks because I want it to be totally going everywhere so that everybody can see this, because this, my friends, let me tell you, I'm not even kidding. I am amazed. I am blessed to know this man. I am blessed to call him a friend. I'm blessed to have amazing adventures with him. Um, this gentleman I met when I was, I think, 32 years old, and I met him in Israel. He has been a professional surfer. He has he's a very avid, hardcore mountain biker. And more than that, and more than any of those things, he is a pivotal figure to so many people in the Jewish community as a rabbi who's been working with Aish HaTorah for, I don't know, as long as when he showed up. I am not going to make this episode a bio about this man, because if you go look for it, you will find a million episodes that talk about how he came up and what he did and all those things. That's not this episode. This episode, we're going to do a deep dive into some and really, hopefully, do some awakenings in this world. So, I today bring to you in episode 68 my friend, my compadre, my rabbi, my confidant, my alats. We even have the same indented sternum. I bring to you on the stage, my friend, Rabbi Yom Tov Glaser. Hi, how you doing?
Hey, shalom, everybody. What's up?
Thank
Happy
you
to
so
be here
much.
with you,
Thank you so much.
Carl. It's been a long,
I'm
strange
so excited.
trip.
Yeah, man. Especially with everything that I'm dealing with, you know. And of course, you know me, I don't hide anything at any point in time in life, from my mental problems to my happiness to my bad times to my begging for money, or hey, I have money, or I'm living in a mansion, or whatever I do. And so I think it's the thing that I've learned as of the last week and a couple days now is that that's been a massive gift in the end, like a stupidly, ridiculously massive gift that
Mm,
is the thing that I'm laying down on now. Like, is the best way to explain it, or even standing on. It's like a platform. It's like a fully, uh, like very developed platform, and there's nothing you can deny it. Like, there's nothing that can deny the amount of trials, tribulations, work, effort, art, love, everything that I've tried to be in my life, you know? And so you can't deny it. And so anybody who might come and try to denounce me or something in some way is going to have a real difficult time, in my opinion.
mm,
Um, and I think the court of public opinion is already basically on my side, specifically when you look at the articles, even if they may have been a little bit heavy
mm,
in the way they portrayed me, but um, I, I I put it on myself on some level, right? Because I went in there in this very serious thing, and in all the photos that they took of me, and in all the photos they did of me, I'm doing a magic trick, or I'm bending a fork, or, you know. So I can't be angry, you know, either that they, you know, took this narrative and ran with it as far as they could with it.
right.
But what upsets me is, in the end, when everything comes to the surface, which will take some time now, right? Because this is just the first cycle, you know, of the news media, where it hits, it does its thing, and then they wash it and clean it and figure out what they're going to do with it, and then push it back out again, like they do with everything. Um, And so, to gauge how much money they're going to make off that story.
Right.
I mean, in the end, that's what they're doing. So, yeah, and I even said it in the first article, and it's kind of poignant now, I guess, on some level. But I said, I think that politics is like a circus, and you guys were missing a magician, so I showed up. And it's such a great quote. I was joking when I said it to the guy. I was just being facetious as hell, and he was like, "Dude, I'm totally using that quote." I'm like, "Okay," I can't, like, he had a recorder there. I can't say no at that point, And then the other one that really has, I think, maybe I wanted to put seriousness upon the actions of what's happened. And so the next quote that I used was,
Paul, it could be a lot of people watching this don't know what you're talking
I'll get
about.
into, yeah.
You might want to just give the headline, like the
yeah, okay. I'll just here. You know what? I'll just do that instead. We'll Google it. We'll Google it together. I just need to look up Biden. Well, look, I've looked it up a million times already. But Biden robocall magician, and let's see if I'm sharing this with everyone. Here we go. So, as of recently, I've been embroiled in a political scandal that has happened with a gentleman who I was consulting for. And as I was saying, look, there's all these photos of me doing magic tricks. So I can't blame them, again, that they took the narrative and ran with it, And I love this right here. It's like this big title. Magician created Biden's AI robocall, they went all the way with it. So yeah, now you look up my name and you see just this. And it's not cool, man. This guy was a friend of my friend's. He offered me work in this world. I thought to myself, like, wow, that's kind of cool, I mean, that's cool. And when I first talked to this guy, he had no idea what he was talking about. He'd never, it shows in the text messages. I even went to my blog once the articles were written, because so much was written incorrectly, that I had to write a whole, soliloquy of my life and all the people that I know and the people that I've connected to and the art that I've created. And because in the end, they've tried to make me, let's see if I can do this. This is pretty funny. A vagabond street magician that's a moon landing denier, conspiracy theorist, AI consultant that made the recording for Biden. It's like the ultimate game of Mad Libs, that game that you play where everybody gets to choose something different. It's like the ultimate grab bag of stupidity that no reporter could say no to. It was like I gave them the biggest candy bar in the world, and they were like, "Oh my god!" Yeah, they were just gonna eat morsels off of it. And so in turn, and the thing that really is upsetting, and this is the weird part, and I can understand how people who are very well known and very famous gain a very kind of like a rhinoceros kind of very tough character about them, right? Because of so much of people saying things that are just absolutely not true. I can see just from this 1 week how it's recorded. It's recorded. You videotaped me saying the story. It's been the same story every single time. I haven't changed anything except for one misguided moment of when the actual first party was. There were two parties, a housewarming party and a Thanksgiving party. And at the housewarming party is when I showed the ability to make voices, and I did in particular a gentleman by the name of Lindsey Graham. I believe he's a senator, very well known, very. And so he had told me that he was working with him. So I didn't find anything wrong with what I was doing. He was sending me the ad copy. I was grabbing. I was putting it in. The machine would generate. I would send him the recording. He would tell me yes, no, and this went on for weeks. So at no point in time does any of what I'm giving him get released into the public. Now, after weeks and weeks of this, I get a text after I ask him what's going on, and his text is, no, the Lindsay team is going to use a recording booth instead. So I'm thinking that maybe they went through all of the ups and downs and the legal this, yes or no's of whether they could do it or even if they wanted to do it. And then they agreed to just, hey, it's too much to deal with. We don't want to do it. And not, mind you, I don't know this. I'm guessing, but I'm saying in my mind, when they said we don't want to do it, then I said, okay. And I also, the first thought I had was, lost some money. It's what it's just the first thing that went through. He's very connected, supposedly, and he does, 200 plus people every 2 to 4 years. And this is anywhere from city council level all the way up to the national. He had worked with Kanye when Kanye was running for president. So, and he was like part of his, inner circle at the time.
He's a promoter, this guy?
He does his from what I understand, right, his company is all about getting signatures to get you on the ballot. So you have to have, you have to have a certain amount of signatures to be able to be a presidential candidate on a ballot, and dependent upon each state. And
what's his name? What's the guy's name?
Steve Kramer, the gentleman that ended up screwing me over. So in the long run, for 2 months, he's telling me, oh, Biden wants me to work with him, but I don't want to, because if I work for him, the contract's not going to let me be bipartisan, and I work both sides of the aisle with my business, right? I don't care where the money comes from. I just take money. And then that makes sense, whatever. He's a businessman. He's just whatever. So, and so at this point, 2 months later, he says, oh, look, I got a job working for Biden. I'm moving into this new house that Biden's campaign has as one of their houses all over the United States or whatever. And we go there, and there's the party. That's when I do the Lindsey Graham voice. Then months later, we go to a Thanksgiving party at his house, and that's when he starts talking to me about possibly doing a Biden recording. And then I don't know when exactly, but it's in the text messages. He says, hey, I'm going to send you the script. And then I said, okay, already sent. Like it was that quick because I had already made the voice. I was already way ahead of the game and ready to go. And then I sent him the thing, and then he sends me a message that says shush, SHHHHHHH, right? And then a link to the article that says Biden robocall released to New Hampshire primary, telling people not to vote. And I immediately text him with some expletive, right? In acronym form. And I end up saying, call him on the phone. We talk for less than 6 minutes. It shows in all the, timelines. And at this point, it's like, dude, what are you doing? And he's like, very jovial, doesn't care. Oh, don't worry about it. I spoofed the number from somewhere else. And I'm thinking to myself, like, how could you not think that this technology is not going to have a watermark? If I used cameras in the 1990s that weren't even connected to Wi-Fi that could tell you your latitude and longitude and what time you took it, what says you that this stuff isn't going to have, And of course, within, I think, a week or so, some company in Palo Alto had devised that it came from this company that I used. And this is a big company. It's not a small company, 11 Labs is the name of the company. And it's the number one text to voice platform that's out there. And mind you, this guy had no idea about any kind of anything AI until I met him. It's even in the text messages. He's like, could you do this if I gave you this? And I'm like, yeah, we could also do video with lips moving, which I did. Let me pull that one up. This one's funny. Because it's an obvious parody and you can't, like, I can't get in trouble for it. And I also have like a big like banner across the whole thing so that you can tell like what I've created is very much so let's bring this on real quick. And I made a video of President Biden saying
media as we know it. Next question. This is the end of media as we know it. Next question. This is the end of media as we know it. Next question. This is the end of.
So, and it's a very prolific statement to be making as an art piece, especially right now. Because of the thing that happened, right? I started to go absolutely crazy writing. I haven't written in a long time, but I just went absolutely crazy, and I started writing books. And the first one that I wrote was called The 7 Types of Humans, which is this right here. Let me add this to the stage, which is this book right here, which is a belief of what I think is coming. And to break down the 7 types of humans, we can just go through this. It's basically you're going to have your indigenous, who will never want to connect to any form of technology. They never have, they never will. Then you'll have people like you and me that are willing to use technology in every day. Then the next will be the genetically altered type of person. Then after that would be the technologically altered, like the person who has Neuralink as of today, right? He's using a mouse already and moving things on a computer with just his brain. And then the next level would be a group of people who would be okay with losing their freedoms for quote unquote safety by having an AI overlord, and they'll live within that community. Then the next will be a oligarchical style of people who will have so much money that they will be able to change any part of themselves, both genetically and both in some kind of mechanical way. And then the last of those would be a genetically modified nanotechnology baby that would be basically ready for the hive, if you will, on some kind of weird level. And that leads to my second book, which is the 5 War Theory, which is, and this is when I want to get you involved in a lot of the things I'm talking about, but just to give an overview of the whole thing, the 5 War Theory talks about what I believe is the next 5 wars that humanity is going to go through, all leading to what I believe is the next step in our evolutionary process, if we're even supposed to move in that direction. And that's also another question I'd like to bring up with you. So the 5 wars, in essence, we're dealing with one of them now, which is what we're dealing with in Israel, Palestine. That what I'm going to say, instead of saying any religion, I'm just going to say that which either does work or that which does not work. And there's one that's worked for a long period of time and has gone through almost every single civilization upon the planet, and then all the other ones are mimicking that thing. And that's just my opinion. But if you look at what it is, it kind of looks at what it is. So I'm not trying to be disrespectful or angry or anything like that. I'm just looking at it from a very macro point of view and looking at it for what it is. Now, that doesn't mean that other people...
You're using the pronoun it a lot, and there's a lot of variables, so I'm starting to lose track. So
Sure,
just
sure.
a little less pronouns.
Okay, no problem. I'll do my best. Um,
But you were talking about the 5 wars.
5 wars. Yeah. So the
Is
first
one of them being like the one that Israel's going through?
right. It's ideological, right? Based on whether you want. We could just say good and evil. It's that simple.
Okay.
And you can be on. You can be an extremist on either side, taking that good and taking that extremism and unfortunately turning that good into something that's very wrong.
Okay.
And the same thing goes on the other side, right? You can take this very evil thing and take it to a very intense evil level that sometimes does good things. I'm not saying always, but it happens. We're just talking about the sense of energy in and of itself.
Okay.
And so this war then moves into a chasm for the second war, which is those who accept and those who do not accept technology as the next movement that happens, just as it happened before with lights and electricity, or with Tesla and Edison fighting over AC and DC current, and not understanding the technology and fearing it instead, which will lead to humans fighting against humans, those who are uh, idealizing the techno enhancements and those who are idealizing connecting with Mother Earth. Um, and then the the third war would be when humanity starts to become very afraid of the AI overlord and the robots that now have autonomy, and we start to fear that we are now losing our grip on being the leaders, if you will, right? Because at this point, we're no longer, unless we're transhuman and we play the game, if you will, there's no way that we will be able to keep up with the intelligence and the rapid movement of this thing, whatever it is that's coming out of the box any moment now, right?
Right.
And then the fourth is when the AI overlord thing and the robots fight against the humans, and we run away to caves and to underground locations, scared of this thing that has now taken over the entire planet. And then the last, I believe, and I don't know if this is true, is a transhuman and a robotic organic being that somehow or another come together in a biological manner to create the next form of movement. And why do I say this? Let me go now all the way back to the belief system and how I created this. I believe that our essence is to want to be writing conscious souls that can do it without having to do. We can just be conscious light. And in turn, I wouldn't have had to have 20 some odd minutes of this conversation. I could have just gone, and you would have gone, yep, I totally understand what you mean. You see what I mean? And so I believe that technology, i.e., starting with fire, moving into the wheel and wielding of clay and metal and engines and these electronic engines that we've created that is helping us do this, is all an effort to
have full
create.
transfer.
Exactly. So that we can transfer our consciousness in some way, shape, or form into this realm that is no longer physical, so that we can create whatever we want within this non-physical, physical reality. Almost like the place where, and now we're going to get into talking to you about all this information, but almost like the place where Adam and Eve were existing when Adam is starting to name all of the animals, right? He's not whole, he's not physical, he's like in this space in between. And so I think that the effort that we are trying to do with technology and wielding it is to wield us in that direction, yet also understanding the ideas behind, at least some of them, behind Jewish mysticism, says that all of the things that come into this space that we live within, the negativity will acquire it first before it's able to fully be shown as the light that it is. And so in turn, I believe that this AI, artificial general intelligence that is emerging as we speak, will be used for these negative aspects that I just mentioned, the 5 or the 7 types of humans, the manipulation of the genetic genome, and all of these things. This 666 mentality, right? The mark of the beast, if you will, that some people talk about. And so, with all of that being said, now I leave you with the platform of all the things that I just said. Could you give me how it is that I'm connecting, or how you could connect some Jewish mysticism and some Zohar, and also please explain the difference between Zohar and Kabbalah, because people don't know the difference, and there is a difference from my understanding, if you wouldn't mind. And again, thank you for being on. And
So, okay. First of all, the Kabbalah is the study of mysticism, and this is the tradition of the Jewish people's mystical tradition. It goes back way before Mount Sinai. It goes all the way back to the ancient Mesopotamia area, and that line of mysticism, which clearly they had technologies way beyond what we would have dreamed, based on various findings, both archaeologically and also in just the knowledge base. For example, an insane amount of detail in the knowledge of the solar system and the cosmology of our solar system and beyond, that you just couldn't have known until modern times, which they knew with incredible precision. That's today is validated in modern science. The leader of the entire world spiritually at the time, his name was Terach, and that was Terach lived 19 generations after Adam, and Terach was the end of the line, like, meaning it was when God just said, like, this place sucks. It just sucks. I'm gonna go pay attention to some other planet, out there in the galaxy. But
wow.
I'm kidding. He didn't give up on the planet, but he certainly was finished with us. And the reason why was because it wasn't just that we chose not to embrace the Creator, and it wasn't just that we chose to venerate. Venerate means to praise, to venerate other powers, but we actually took the powers that the Creator put in the world to run this place and bowed down to them. So meaning it's not just that you didn't want to be faithful to your spouse, but not only did you cheat on your spouse, but you cheated on your spouse in your husband's bedroom in his mansion.
Wow.
And that's why, the most beautiful line in the entire Torah is, and this, by the way, is amazing. This is the line that Oprah spoke out, like, internationally, and said, this is right when she became a disciple of Eckhart Tolle. And, and Eckhart Tolle is coming from a Buddhist perspective where it's just like, whatever made this place is so big, And so she says, she actually renounced Christianity based on the line in the Torah, in the actual 5 books of Moses, that God is a jealous God. And which is the most beautiful line of the whole Torah. I understand where she was coming from. She was saying, it's kind of petty to, like, how could you say the creator of the universe gets jealous? Like, that's ridiculous. But it's meant to be the most beautiful line in the whole book. It's the line that's saying, I love you so much that I don't want to share you with anyone else. Like, turn your heart to me. And we all know, if you're married, for example, you know you're sharing your spouse with their work, and you're sharing your spouse with their friends. And it's like, when you really love them, you get jealous. You're like, I don't want to share you with anybody. I want you all to myself. And that's what God was really saying. But you'll notice that the words, that it says something strange. It says that his name is Kelkanah. His name is the jealous God. But that doesn't make his name is the jealous God. I don't think anyone calls him the jealous God. But it says that's his name. Why? Because the whole world's made of his names. We're all inside the bedroom. This is the mansion. We're all inside the palace. And it's made of names because, before there was something, there was nothing. And every big banger believes that before there was something, there was nothing. And so of course they have to spend their next, their whole lifetime trying to figure out what the nothing is, because how can nothing make something? So they, every big university has a theoretical physics department to stare at their belly buttons to figure out what the nothing is, because how could nothing make something? But that's why we call it God. What is the word God? The word God is the term you give to something that can make, the term you give to the nothing, or a being that can make something from nothing. That's the term God. If you can make something from nothing, we would call you God. It's just never been done. Right. And believe me, the physicists are spending millions of our tax-paying dollars to create some kind of machine that could somehow make something from nothing. But of course,
I think they recently just did in a plasma form. I think they made the first time ever where they were able to create two parts from one. It just happened. It only happened for like something of a second or something, but it happened.
Okay, I'll look it up. But it's still from one.
Mind you, they had to use like 100 and something odd lasers, and they had to do all this crazy. It's insane what they're doing to create the heat and the amount of pressure.
The desperation. That's the desperation. I call those people the high priest of the secular world, because in order to, what's the biggest issue of being a human being? The biggest issue is conscience. Hitler himself said, "I came to remove the conscience from the heart of man." It's in Mein Kampf. Yeah, he says the conscience was a Jewish invention. So he thought if he could eradicate the Jews, he could eradicate the conscience. But these physicists are like, okay, we're not going to get rid of the Jews, because the physicists are smart enough to know that getting rid of the Jews won't get rid of your conscience. And now, but Hitler was smart, though, because he knew that the Jews were carpet bombing the world with ethical monotheism. Because as soon as we didn't do our job in Jerusalem, as soon as we blew it, and God scattered us around the world, it was to infect the world with ethical monotheism, so everyone would have conscience. Why? To save their butts. Because every time a civilization loses their moral compass, God pulls the plug. God always pulls the plug on a civilization that loses their way. Why? Why would God pull the plug? Because once you say there's no such thing as morality, once you say there's no right and wrong, so what are you doing here? What are you doing here? So anyway, but the long story short is that the word Shmo, the whole world's made of his names, which means that the whole world is his palace, the whole world's his bedroom. And so I'm a surfer, but don't bow down to the waves. And I'm a mountain biker, but don't bow down to my boutique mountain bikes. And I'm into music, but don't bow down to your 1962 Gibson, and I'm into yoga, but don't bow down to your yoga teacher, because the whole world's made of his names, and that's the bedroom. Now, anyway, but there's the most beautiful line in the Torah is that line, because it's saying, I love you so much. So let's go back. Terach is 19 generations after Adam, and he is the master wizard of the planet. And he had a son named Abraham. It's an amazing thing that the leader of the generation in spirit I mean, this guy's mastery of the Vedic horoscopes system. You know, this is the real deal. The Vedic horoscope system is like way beyond any other horoscope system you ever hear. He was the master of all this stuff. And this is why Abraham was, you ever thought about this? Abraham stayed in his home for 75 years. It doesn't make any sense. Like at 3 years old, he already started with a hunch that there's actually a God beyond all this. At 25, he was solidified. He was like, yeah, that's it. But then he spent the next 50 years still living in his father's house. Why was he still living in his father's house? And in fact, the commandment that God said, go forth from your father's house, like leave, was when he was 75 years old. That was the first time he ever heard God's voice, 75 years old. And he had been persecuted for 50 years, because once he got it solidified at 25, he became majorly persecuted by the idolatrous surroundings. And to the point where, like, Nimrod, who was like the king of, like, he was this builder who was like a giant king, and he was like a crazy megalomaniac. He actually threw Abraham in a furnace, and Abraham just like, God is all that there is, which means this fire is made of God. And it, just like fire can burn it, maybe it could also heal, you know, it could be anything. And he comes out of the furnace alive.
Wow.
And anyway, but why was he hanging out there? Because he was hanging out with the leader of the generation. He was in major apprenticeship, learning the secrets of the universe. He was getting all the
from his father. Of course.
Yeah, he was in there, which was really funny because Jordan Peterson makes fun of the fact that he stayed home, because that's one of his themes, is like, get the boys out of their parents' home. The 38-year-old long-haired guy in his basement, you know, who's lost his skin pigment because all he does is smoke cannabis and play something Warcraft. What is that?
World of Warcraft.
World of Warcraft. You know, his parents can't evict him because of rent control or whatever.
Oh, it's funny. So wait, okay. So let me pull you back a bit. This is why I said my statement about the Kabbalah and Zohar. So I thought, and I could be wrong here, that the Zohar was the text and the Kabbalah is like the story of the text.
Right. So no, Kabbalah. Let's get back to that. So the Kabbalah is simply Jewish mysticism.
Okay, that's just okay. And then what? And the
it
Zohar
means literally to receive.
Okay.
Okay. And that's the Kabbalah. Kabbalah is just simply Jewish mysticism. Now, Jewish mysticism was always oral. It was never written. It was always an oral tradition. It did not get written down. It stayed oral, and it had to stay oral because it's dangerous. And it was not something you could write down and have it wind up in the wrong hands. There are many, many rules about it. For example, once you get to the higher levels of it, you're only allowed to teach it to one other person who can go on to maybe teach to one other person. And that one other person has to be such an expert in mysticism. I'm talking about specific subjects can only be taught, meaning there's certain subjects you can teach to 3 people. There's certain subjects you can teach to 5 people. But eventually you get down to there's certain subjects can only be taught one-on-one. And the person has to have been able to figure it out on his own. Which means while you teach it, you have to teach it encoded in a way that he's figuring it out as you teach it. You can't teach it in a way. See, normally when you and I are talking, we're being very careful to make sure the other person's getting the communication. But there are such secret mystical things that are so dangerous that you can only teach it to someone who really, they're already on the edge of it. They're on the edge. They just need to, they just need someone to like give a couple little code words.
Got it.
Kind of like a video I saw of you where some dudes on the street, it looked like Hollywood because I saw some stars on the ground, where you had to guess what color the crayon was, and you were like pulling it out of them.
Well, where was this?
It was some YouTube video of you.
I didn't.
He had a box of crayons, and the color was
Yeah.
like melon, I think. But you like,
Yeah, I haven't done that trick in years. I love that trick. It was such a good trick.
yeah,
Yeah,
and you
it's
were
such a beautiful
pulling
effect.
these letters out of his mind, and with a little help, you were giving him like darker letters would be of lower tone, but he
Oh
didn't
yeah,
sing
yeah,
and he didn't speak. He just
yeah,
sent it
yeah,
to you.
yeah.
Anyway, um,
The great effect, by the way. The guy who created that, phenomenal mind behind that idea.
now
Yeah.
came along the Romans, and I usually say bastards after I say Roman, but I'll just let you say bastard each time. And we're not talking about modern Rome today, although we would like our vessels back from the Vatican to come back to Jerusalem,
So
and
we
maybe,
have a lot. You're bringing so many things up that I want to hit now. There's like
and
questions I have.
we also like some reparations for the Colosseum they built with the gold. This is literally in history books. They used the gold of Jerusalem to pay for the Colosseum, the building of the
Okay.
Colosseum.
Okay. Before we go off on tangents, I have a question.
We didn't finish okay, go ahead.
No, I'm right back at the Zohar, I think. So,
Okay.
so there's a story, and I think I might have heard it from you.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that there were three people, two gentlemen and a young boy, a son of one of the gentlemen, who lived in a cave, and this is how this Jewish mysticism came to be. Am I wrong about
Yeah,
that part of the story?
you're close. It was two people. What happened was a an informant of the Roman government at the time. The Romans already took over Israel. They were somewhat letting the Jews do their thing at the time, and but not too much. Meaning no Torah study, no, like any Torah study they were doing, they had to do in hiding. And and what happened was an informant amongst the Jews came up to a couple other sages, these very special elders, who one of whom was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And Rabbi Shimon, what he said was, "Isn't this great? Like these beautiful roads and bridges and aqueducts that the Romans have given us?" And Rabbi Shimon says, "I'd rather do without all of this modern technology and everything. It's similar to the wars you were talking about before. I'd rather do without all the Roman conveniences, because, and anyway," he said, "they only built this stuff for themselves. They didn't build it for us. They built it for themselves. And I'd rather not have it. I'd rather they all get lost." And he immediately informed that there's someone speaking against the Romans. And then word got to Rabbi Shimon that you are, meaning they're coming for you. And so he was, at first he was going to go home, and then he realized, like, bad idea.
How do I do that? Right.
Yeah, bad idea. And then he took his son, who was, a great scholar named Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer. He took his son, and the two of them went to a cave, and they spent the next 13 years. They actually spent 12 years. They actually, to keep their clothes, they wanted to keep their clothes for Shabbat, so they'd have clothes, because they didn't know how long they were going to be there. So they actually took off their clothes, buried themselves up to their necks with sand.
Whoa. Okay.
And studied. Everything was oral Torah at that time. Meaning, besides the the Tanakh, the Torah and the writings and the prophets and the writings, they would spend their whole week studying buried in sand. And Shabbat would come, they would wash themselves off and put on their clothes, and so they would have Shabbos clothes, because we're supposed to change our clothes for the Sabbath. And so at the end of the 12 years, they had tremendous light of high mystical proportion entering them the whole time, meaning they were going into like full, they lived at around 2,000 years ago, okay? Right after the destruction of the Second Temple, which was destroyed in year 70 Common Era. And they lived after that. And they were there was no such thing as prophecy anymore, but the closest anyone ever got to prophecy was this in this cave.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
they were getting a major download. And when they
Mhm.
came out of that cave, everything they saw was burning up. Birds were flying over their head, burning up. They saw a farmer farming his land. They were like, how can you work in this world when everything is the next world? Meaning everything is the spirit world. And the farmer looked up at them. They looked down at him, and he exploded. And a
Right.
voice came from heaven and said, boys, back in the cave. And they had to go back to the cave for another year to learn how to live the mystical tradition without burning anybody.
Right.
And
I've heard that story a bit differently, where it all the same, right? But the ending was a little different, or at least I've been telling it differently, which was that someone said to them, or a voice, whatever it was, said to them, if you're so wise in your knowledge of Torah and this idea, then you wouldn't be burning people, you'd be giving them life and energy of love, right?
yeah,
And
there's
so that's
probably
why they had to go back and then come, right? And so that because it makes sense though, right? It's this idea that sometimes we believe we know more than we do. You know
right.
what I mean? And then we get
Yeah,
involved in a situation. We go, "Oh, I didn't know. I got to go back. I'll be back. I'll be back."
exactly. And they and you know what's interesting is this week's we just finished reading the Torah portion, and it said that Moses' face was glowing after a while, all this talking with God, that he started freaking out the people, that people couldn't deal with him because his face was literally, and this is where Gentiles have this idea that we have horns, because
Mhm.
it said there were rays of light, Karen or. Karen
Mm,
means rays
mm,
of
mm.
light, but you can misunderstand the word Karen to think horns of light, because it's also the term for a ram's horn is a Karen. but like for example, X-ray has krina. It has radiation. It radiates. All it
Mm-mm.
means is he was radiating light.
Right.
And but like
Hey,
Gentiles are like, where are your horns? You know, anti-Semites like used to say, where are your horns? So anyway, but what happened was it was freaking out the Jewish people. So Moses got like a brown paper bag or something, which is in Hebrew is called a masveh. And whenever he walked around the camps, it was with a mask. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, Moses walked around
So
with a mask.
here's another question for you. Speaking of Moses and speaking of Sinai, there's this story, and I've been telling this, so I might have been telling it wrong. So I hope I'm not. But
Yeah.
there's the 600,000 Jews that get to Sinai, and that at this
600.
point,
It was
God.
600,000 males between 20 and 60.
Okay,
So it's
I'm gonna.
300. If you do the math with the children, the elderly, and all the women, it comes out to 3 million at Mount Sinai.
Okay, so I'm
Go
gonna
on.
change it from now on. But three
No, but the
million.
600,000 is very important because those 600,000 men were these very special 600,000 root souls,
Mm-hmm.
and all the women and children around and the elderly were all these branches, because root souls, it's called root for a reason, because it's got a trunk, you know, and then it's got branches. And so like the fact that I have so many students is probably because I'm a pretty thick either branch, or maybe I'm part of a trunk or something, and I've got a lot of branches coming off. You understand?
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Got it. 100.
And
Right.
you,
So
Paul, are the ultimate example of one of my favorite fruits.
I love you, brother. And I'm glad to still be on the tree and not plucked just yet. Uh, um, uh, so going into the story that we were just on a second ago.
Oh wait, just finishing that the Zohar.
No,
So
no,
because of those Roman bastards,
bastards.
yeah, that was going to be your job. Um, because of those Roman, they it became apparent to the sages that they had to write down the oral tradition. And
Mm,
so they wrote down the law, like how to live your life day to day in what's called the Mishna.
Mm-hmm.
And they wrote down the Zohar,
Okay.
which is about God, meaning the Mishnah is God's will, and the Zohar is God himself.
So
Meaning
that's
the Mishnah is how should you spend your day? Like, what do you do if you find a lost object? You know, it's the will of God. Whereas the Zohar is all about studying God himself. It's like a relationship, you know, like Paul, I know you quite deeply at this point. And and I also know a bit about your will. And for me to go against your will would be painful for you. But let's say I only kept your will, but I ignored my love of you. Let's just do it husband and wife. What if a husband and wife, you have the spouse that you love, but you also have you have a list of things they like, positive commandments, and they don't like, negative commandments, right? You have this list of things. So one is their will and one is them, their essence. So if you did one or the other, imagine like my wife, I have a wife. Yeah, you spoke to her this morning, actually. So I have a wife, and imagine all I do is just keep telling her, I love you so much. I love you. I keep eye contact. I'm connected. Yeah, I love you. And meanwhile, I totally ignore what she wants me to do, and I totally ignore what she doesn't want me to do. Yeah, I ignore her will. The next time I say I love you, she'll be like, well, what do I care? You know, you're ignoring me. Or what if the opposite? What if I always did whatever she wanted, and I didn't do whatever she didn't want? I checked every box, but I never gave eye contact, no quality time, no I love you. You understand? So these two themes are very important in life. They're very important in relationship with God, meaning one is to get into that meditative state so that you're really communing with the oneness of God, or doing awaken meditative state, which is called the Tao in the Eastern traditions, which means that I'm going to actually interact with the mountain bike in God, so to speak, in the palace. And the other is that moral voice, which I was saying before, that the Gentiles just couldn't take the Jews based on that. And of course, today the modern physicists they don't have it in for the Jews. They have it in for like, how can we have nothing make the world? And so they're going to spend their whole day trying to figure out what that nothing was.
Okay, so now let's get back to
so Zohar.
No. Okay, go ahead.
Zohar's the written conversations.
There we go. That's what I was looking for.
It's very encrypted. So is Mishna. Mishna is also encrypted.
For instance, the story of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, this story itself of them walking and burning the people, where's that story? Where's that?
That story is actually brought in the Zohar.
It is. Okay. Yeah. There we go. So, okay. Yeah. So it's all in the Zohar. Okay. So just for clarification per person.
When they came out of the cave, he scribed the Zohar. And that Zohar was meant to be the light till the Messianic era.
Got it.
And by the way, the word Zohar means the glow. It means glowing. It was supposed to be the glowing light of God till the times of the Messianic era. It failed, by the way. There was a false Messiah who misused it. You can look this up on Google. His name was Shabtai Tzvi. He was a false Messiah who misused the Zohar, creating all kinds, because part of the Zohar are secrets of how to manipulate matter, Mr. Magician. And he misused it and created a whole messianic thing around himself. He actually brought millions of Jews to Jerusalem. And in the end, Ottoman Turks or something, they just put him on, put a knife around his head, around his neck, and just said, convert to Islam. He's like, I do, and that was over, And we don't know what happened to him after that. Could be they killed him. I don't know.
Right.
but they
I want to get
he
back. I want to get back to a
yeah, go ahead.
couple other things because we were at Sinai. We were at 600,000 men and
Oh yeah,
young men. Right now, there's two things I have questions on now. The first one is I've heard a story that when arriving or at some point while they're getting to Mount Sinai or in front of Mount Sinai, Moses is with everyone and God speaks to everyone, and when doing so, the all of the people could not accept this power, this awe, if you will, and their souls popped out of their bodies, and God put them back in. I've heard that this happened 3 times, at
twice.
which point, twice, excuse me, at which point then Moses says, whoa, 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 let me accept, because they obviously can't, and I'll go up to the, is that, no? Is that incorrect? Is the
Close,
other way
close.
around?
So
Okay.
the third time,
Mm.
they said to Moses, like, we can't take this. We're done. We're out. It's quite obvious that we do not have the vessel for this light. And you should know that it's not simple to have your fuse blown like that.
No.
Meaning, it's not like they just died. I mean, they went through the explosive effect of having more light than you can handle. I've seen this happen to people on psychedelics, and
Mm.
and I've had people come to me years later, still in PTSD.
Whoa.
And whatever dose and whatever plant they had taken, had they built themselves appropriately, they could have handled maybe in a couple of years or something.
Mm. Mm.
But we're talking like PTSD. So this happened once for the first commandment, which is I am the Lord your God, etc. And
Okay.
then immediately, like 3 million people are flat on the desert floor dead.
Mhm.
God's like, oh man, can you imagine Moses is the only one standing? He was hardcore. Moses like, can you turn it down a bit? You know, you just knocked out the people I brought out of Egypt. You know, so
Wow.
God's like, I got this, and he blows the souls back into everyone's nostrils. Everyone gets up. The second they got up, they ran, and the tradition says they ran, and Moses runs after them. God sends angels like to look like people after them to convince them, come on back, come on back. That was
Wait,
only the
okay, and wait, hold on. And this is even after the 40 years bit.
no.
This is even
No.
this is
This is
this is before
40
the 40 years in the
days.
desert.
40
No.
days after leaving Sinai. Sorry, 50 days. This is 50th day, literally the 50th day after leaving Egypt. It's the 50th
Wait,
day.
hold on. Wait, hold on. These are the same people that saw the 10 plagues. These are the same people that
10
saw
plagues, the splitting of the sea,
all of it. And they still are like, we're not into
yeah.
it. And then my
And
next
listen to
question
this.
is,
Listen to
hold
this.
on.
It
Okay,
says,
well, hold on. Okay, go ahead.
but it says that at the splitting of the sea, it says the simplest handmaid, just the splitting of the sea, the simplest handmaid had a deeper prophetic experience than Ezekiel, the prophet. The simplest handmaid. So meaning the people standing at Mount Sinai are hardcore,
Mm,
and they
mm,
were not
mm.
hardcore enough for what happened.
No, and that brings my next question. When Moses comes down the first time, out of the 600,000 men that are there that we're talking about, then doesn't he tell many of those to kill themselves and their firstborn because of not following when Moses comes down the first time before he goes back up the mountain again? Isn't there a moment where they have the golden calf and he's like, kill
Yeah,
yourselves for being okay?
yeah.
I'm just asking.
It wasn't that. It was that he comes down. It's, by the way, that was this week's parsha as well. Glowing
Oh wow.
Moses is the same
Mm,
parsha as it's called Kitisa or Kisisa.
mm.
And anyway, what happened was that the Moses was coming down after 40 full days at Mount Sinai.
Okay.
But it got to the 40th day and it was not yet a full day. And they were like, hey, what happened to Moses? But the truth is that some dark forces came in and said, like, hey, your guy Moses is dead. And I think they even saw a vision of him dead or something. And
Oh,
then
wow.
and so they make this golden calf, which is now this creature that's tripping out, and it was like a full on like freaky, in life. It wasn't just a golden thing, it was moving. It was like, and they're like, this is what took us out of Egypt, this thing, like we got a new God now, and there's a new sheriff in town. And
Wow.
and what happened was
I always
Moses.
understood it that, sorry, always understood that the golden calf was the people, even after, and correct me if I'm wrong, they spent 40 years in the desert. It takes one generation to forget. No?
It's the people who witnessed everything. They're the people who even witnessed the Mount Sinai prophecy.
No, I know, but I'm saying I thought that those people had to spend a certain amount of time in the desert to forget what it was like. No, tell me what that line is or where
The
that comes
40
from.
years in the desert was for believing the spies' evil report about the land of Israel. Meaning the
I'm
Jews were
lost.
2 days they were a 2-day walk to Israel. I mean, think about it. You're leaving Egypt. You got like a 2.5-day walk.
Right, right.
What's the 40 years all about? So what happened was the leaders of the tribes, and these 10 like sour characters, 2 of them were good and 10 were sour, said, hey, we can't just bring all these millions of people into Israel. We got to send spies to check it out. So when they went to check it out, they just saw that Israel was like, no, it's too dangerous. Like, we're going to get slaughtered when we get to the Canaanite nations. We're not going to be able to do it, whatever. And they come back and give this terrible report that we're never going to be able to conquer the land of Canaan. And and immediately all of the Jewish people just start well, not the women, all the men just started crying. They're like, we're gonna die, and the Levites did not cry. The Levites, they also did not sin at the golden calf. They did not bow to this golden calf. And the women also did not cry, and they did not sin at the golden calf. But so what happened was God said, you're going to cry about nothing? You don't think that the God who just decimated the most powerful civilization in the world, meaning Egypt, can't handle a bunch of Canaanite monkeys? Yeah, we got this, And so he says, you're going to cry over nothing? Well, I'll give you something to cry about. And you're going to spend everyone who cried has to die in the desert. And it's going to take, so then they wandered for 40 years to get that generation of people who lack faith to die. And so they died. Of course, the women didn't have to die, and anyone who didn't cry didn't have to die, and none of the Levites had to die. And they went into Israel. Do you want to know something crazy? A lot of people don't know this because, they think, oh, this is all made up, like thousands of years ago, this is total this is all, what would they call, even Peterson would probably call all this mythology, You want to hear how not mythology it is? Do you know that archaeologists have real proof that King David was running the show in Jerusalem with a full Torah community, with full Hebrew being spoken? We have coins. We have coinage with King David on it. We have all kinds of stuff of proof of King David's leadership then. So now even the biggest atheists in the world can't get out from the fact that there was a King David running the show in Jerusalem with a full Jewish people, with the building of the temple, with like a real civilization based on the Torah. Well, guess what? Guess what? You know how many years took place between Mount Sinai and King David with a full Jewish civilization? It's something like 450 years. So when people want to say, oh, yeah, it's 2024, obviously thousands of years ago, this is mythology, it was just made up. No, we have proof today that King David was the king of a civilization of Hebrews living a complete Torah lifestyle in Jerusalem.
Wow.
and
Wow.
that was 400 years from Mount Sinai. So
Mhm.
it's like, how do you make all that up? And think about it.
Mhm.
And also, if you had a human being who's like charismatic enough to convince people that they're from this tradition, so
Yeah.
even if he came and tried to convince you that you're from this tradition, he would have to convince everyone all at once that their family was at Mount Sinai, because it's 300,000 people. Sorry, it's 3 million people.
Right.
So that were all there. You see, Paul, I can't tell you were at Kmart yesterday in Los Angeles.
Right.
You would just say I
Yeah.
wasn't. And if I told you, well, it was your ancestors who witnessed the greatest thing in human history, there, you just go up to your aunt and say, Aunt Edna, have you heard anything about such a thing? She's usually like, what you talking about, boy?
Mhm.
And so you understand that you in 400 years, you can't convince a civilization that they were somewhere that they
Mhm.
weren't.
Mhm. Right. Right.
And
Right.
you just couldn't do it. And you'll notice that every tradition in the world all starts with one person. Judaism
Mhm.
starts with 3 million.
Mhm.
3
Mhm.
million witnesses.
Right. Right.
And we already have full archaeological proof that little more than 400 years later, they were living as an entire civilization based on the witnessing of that Mount Sinai experience. By the
Right.
way, the word Sinai means hatred.
Ooh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Mount Hatred.
because the world's going to hate us for it.
Oh my God, that's so good.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's like winning the wrong lottery.
I know what that feels like.
Yeah, you won it now.
Okay, so
Okay, so we did that. Now we know it's Jewish mysticism,
yeah,
and we
we
know
got
that
all of
Zohar is a book that was encrypted so that the world would not forget.
it. It only took an hour.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that we're here, and we've kind of crossed all the T's and dot the I's as far as where we're going today, um, we're gonna get a little serious now. I talked about transhumanism, and I've been saying a lot lately that transhumanism leads to eugenics. It's the part of transhumanism that I fear.
Can you define your terms, transhumanism and eugenics?
So your eugenics is the manipulation of the gene to create a perfect person, or to have not any of its diseases or any of its
Got it.
uh, traumas or dramas that it could have on a physical level. Your A transhuman is a person who is willing to accept uh, the transmutation of the human body. So a transhuman, somebody who's moving into a new phase, whatever that phase be. Once again, that's why I wrote the book, because those phases can be different for each person. One person could just say, no, I only want to genetically modify myself, and I'm only going to use mRNA and the Cas9 chimera gene, and I'll use that to be able to manipulate my body. I'll be stronger, or I can have lasers coming out of my eyes, or better hearing, or whatever on a genetic level. And then there's the people who can do it on a physical level by attaching something to their brain, and now I'm smart. I know kung fu, yeah. I mean, so all of these processes are things that are actually starting to happen in today's world. We're seeing them happen. So from a mysticism point of view, from the point of view also of what I was talking about, how the negative gets it first, um, could you give a little bit of that ilk, that you know what I'm talking about now?
Yeah, sure.
And
Again,
also the
but we're
dichotomy.
moving into conjecture and poetics,
No,
but
no, it's fine.
it isn't.
Philosophy is great. I like it. But what I'm trying to get at as well is that I would like, if you wouldn't mind, or if you can, is there two sides to each side that I'm talking about? In other words, is there a side of and this is going to sound really horrible, is there a side of eugenics that's actually good? Like in the sense of, if I could take away Alzheimer's from the planet, or if I could take away whatever, heart disease, cancer, all of the negative, no AIDS, all gone, and I can make you live 10 years, 20 years longer, and make you look 30 years old for the rest of your life. At what point is it, because this is the ethical quandary that I think everybody's going to start to think about here very soon, if they're not thinking about it now in life. Because I don't think we're but 15 years away from the seventh type of human. You know,
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that anything that allows the soul to ride the body longer is generally positive. Generally going to be positive. So now there is a too long, you know. The only reason I know there's a too long is because if you look in the Torah, you see that people used to live hundreds and hundreds of years, and God's like, no, that's going to be a very long adolescence. Because think about it. Today, let's say a life expectancy is in the 70s. Right. You'll notice that kids somewhere between 15 and 25 think they don't have to do anything. So do the math. If 70 years means you get 10 years of doing nothing.
Right.
That called
then what, 400, 500, 700 years? It's like 300 years.
800 years, 900 years. So that's like, that means you're spending like 200 years just playing video games. So what happened? So what happened was, in the times of Noah, 10 generations after Adam, in the times of Noah, God says, new decree, like 120 is the max. That's the words that were used. 120 is the max. Meaning not that anyone's going to live till then, and you could live maybe a little more, but 120 is basically that's the edge, and that's why in Judaism we bless people to live to 120. So
wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, when someone turns 60, you say, okay, you're halfway there. So
I have two other weird questions. It's just offshoot questions, but why in Judaism do you not count things? You say and. Why is that? And then the other one, and this is a totally weird thing. It's been in my head for years. There was a rabbi in a mikvah, and he was playing or doing some kind of singing or playing with his fingers, and then somebody got mad at him for doing it. And he's like, I wasn't really doing what you thought I was doing, or something to that effect. I don't know if you know the story, or if
that story I've never heard. I can't comment on that one, but but there is there's a tradition in Judaism that this world isn't real, that this world's really an illusion. It's not just a tradition; it's our actual belief that we are a projection from God, which makes sense, by the way, because you see, either God's projecting us into existence or humans are projecting God into existence, meaning we can't both be real.
Oof.
Meaning if God's all that's real, then that's all there is.
Well, what about the idea of like a fractal design? Like I watched a beautiful video recently that's talking about the Mandelbrot set, and within the Mandelbrot set, there's something called the Feigenbaum constant. And the Feigenbaum constant runs at 4.699, right? And so that every single time that there's this bifurcation within the number system, it shows that from the point of start to the point of where the bifurcation is, it's literally the same over and over. And this is like this weird number that is throughout all of like nature. And there's this weird, like, where did it come from? And so and so I guess my question is, because we're getting into some really like philosophical, like, real weird conversations here, and I'm just trying to stay grounded, and also the overall arcing of what we're talking about, which is this new technology, this new thing that's coming. and a lot of
Let me,
people fearing this thing that's coming. And my
uh,
question, and I think I asked it already, but I'm going to ask you again, if you can give me both sides of this new technology, how we see it in the Jewish mysticism. Is it considered a negative thing, or like I said, is it negative no matter what when it first comes in? And then we learn to manipulate it to be good. So if you wouldn't mind that kind of thing.
yeah,
Thank you, by the
I'll
way, for
play
your
with it.
time again.
I'll play with it a little. But I just want to say one thing about these constant numbers that are embedded in creation. Do you know what number is really, really embedded in absolutely everything, without any exceptions?
Right. There is no other. Right. I got it. I got it.
So when I
Uh,
play, no, but when I play an A string at 440 oscillations per second on my guitar over here,
mm,
it's 441s, isn't it?
mm,
And
okay.
4.69 or 5, what was it? 5.69.
Well, actually, wouldn't it be like if it's 440 hertz, wouldn't it be like 880 positive and negative vibrations? Tops and bottoms of the spectrum on what you're actually able to accept, right, or what you're
Yeah.
hearing from the vibration. So, yeah, I mean, but neither
Let's go
here nor
back to
there
your
on that.
question, though. Back to your question.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Um,
basically, that, no, and I'm totally with you in what you're doing. Um,
but let's
and
go to the question. So I'd like to
yeah,
go to Adam and Eve.
the question is new technology that's coming, that's
I got it. I got it.
definitively different than any other kind of tech that's ever been before. That has the ability to really change a lot. Like and I've said this before. I don't know if I said this to you, but I think we're only 6 or 9 months away from a situation where we can't tell what we're hearing and what we're seeing through video. And then that's going to create this AI Snopes kind of ideology where, oh, CNN has their own AI that tells you the facts and the truth, and so does Fox, and so does this, and so does this, and so it becomes like resounding chambers of their own fractionalized version of reality and facts. It's already happened.
Yeah.
So then what's going to happen? The next step from there is that the only way to prove that you are being real and that you are real is that you have to have a camera that follows you around 24 hours a day. If you're the president, or if you're a police officer, or if you're a teacher, anybody with influence must be watched at all times, because otherwise you won't be able to see or know if what they're doing is real, because the videos and the audios that are created of them now look so real and so authentic that you can't tell if that person's not doing it unless they're videotaping themselves 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
How do you know
We're
that's not?
only
How do you know that's not being done?
and that is was so that's why each one of these major networks will have their own dragonflies that will be flying around and creating their own versions of what facts are, based on the way that they tune their resounding chamber to be.
Okay, let
And
me go.
what
Let me
other
go.
people, go
Let me
ahead.
go.
Yep.
Okay, so the Adam and Eve eat from the binary tree. Before they ate from the binary tree, which is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which we call the tree of knowledge. But you can't forget that it's the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which means binary. What's good and evil? You know, it's hot and cold, it's dark and light, it's all binary. It's the only ability to exist really in knowledge. Meaning things have to exist in perspective, in distinction. Otherwise, there can be no knowledge. And that's what we're discussing right now. Knowledge is how can we know something's true? How can we know something's real? It requires the fruit of evil. The fruit of knowledge, the fruit of distinction.
And so is this on?
There were two trees they weren't allowed to eat from. One was the tree of knowledge, and the other one was the tree of life. The tree of life would be the tree of eternity, to where you never have to die, which is exactly the subjects you're bringing up. Think about what you've said now. In formulating your question, you've been talking about two major themes. How do we know what is tree of knowledge? And the other was, are we not in an era where we are ultimately working on living forever? Tree of life. And how interesting is that the tree of knowledge and the tree of life are where the world's at right now. We've always been in a crisis with death. That's always been a crisis. But we have created our own crisis with knowledge. And AI is taking that to the next level now.
Now, also on the same level, though, Yom Tov, isn't it all God? Isn't it all one? And isn't the creation of what's happening also meant to be? And so, like, I was also talking to Svi Lipschitz. He has his podcast. It's called The Truth Fanatics with Frank Zelenko, which is Zelenko's brother, and they have an amazing podcast. And his brother's an amazing scholar. I would love for you to be on his podcast. You should go on his podcast. They're great together, and you would have amazing conversations with them. But they were talking about this in that respect of what I was just saying, that there's this idea of, everything is. There's this, I guess, a Buddhist conceptual idea as well, where everything's happening the way it's supposed to happen, the way it is, like it's meant to be. And so AI, in essence, is meant to be. And then artificial general intelligence, it's meant to be. And then artificial super intelligence is meant to be. And so if that's the case, then and I'm stretching here now, is artificial super intelligence our attempt to recreate God, or is it God?
Or to create. Doesn't have to be God. God is God without us. It's our being God-like. Think about it. What are the words?
So wait, going back. So now this is where the conversation gets weird, Yom Tov. So then, is eugenics inherently good or bad?
So it is apparently. Well, first of all, based on what you just said, and it's also based on Jewish tradition, there is no such thing as bad in this situation. Meaning, I got to be careful. People splice stuff. There is no such thing as bad.
No, it's great. No, I know this is a very tough conversation. What we are doing right now is not easy. This is the stuff that like people.
There is no such thing. Retroactively as bad, meaning I can pay for it or I can steal it. Yeah, paying for it's good, stealing it's bad. Okay, now I stole it, and now I was driving it at 120, and I was high as hell, and then hit a bus which went down a ravine, and now like 50 grieving families, and it's like which caused all kinds of, which, by the way, the families, it was a bus trip for couples of a school, which means it's now 50 orphans, not to mention all their siblings. And now they grow up and they go into, like, this one becomes the head of this foundation, and that one becomes the head of that foundation, and they wind up like in this crazy synergistic thing that saves the planet, and even creates technologies where cars can't go that far from the highway even anymore, and who knows what else it makes. So, but it all came from from the stolen rental car. 'Cause, you know, someone pulled up out in front of the airport because it was some rich dude.
Right.
Some rich dude
Right.
who's like, I don't give a damn about it. They'll tow it back to Avis.
Right. Right.
And you know, but the guy coming out of the airport was like, oh man, where's Avis? He's like, oh, there's an Avis. And the rich dude, you know, he sees him get out and run and says to his wife, they can tow it as far as I'm concerned. So the guy just got in and started driving. The problem is he was high as hell. And the bus went down the ravine.
Right.
You understand? So retrospectively, it's exactly as it was meant to be.
Mm.
It's all perfect.
But there's choices along the way, no matter what.
And those choices, if you choose good, it will be good for you. Meaning the guy who stole the Ford Mustang, and the guy who stole the red Mustang convertible, and knocked the bus down the ravine. His life just like starts taking all these crazy turns and like meaning he didn't even crash. It's just the bus tried to get out of his way. He was the wrong way on a highway. The bus tried to swerve.
Oh, wow. Right.
You know,
Right.
he made it. He made it, but like his life gets screwed if you follow the rest of his story. His story is this crazy story where he is so karmically messed up that, you know, that he can't even like get himself he can never kind of recreate himself into the world, you know, in any real way, because he knows, he watched the news, he saw it all, you know, there's a manhunt out for him, but of course he's not connected to the car, and the rich guy's already in Vegas. And I write screenplays all day, by the way, without ever writing anything. If anyone wants a screenplay, you know, just come to me. So anyway,
so I have
I was
a friend
born
of
in
mine.
Hollywood for a reason, but I
have a friend of mine, by the way, and his name is Chris Woods, and he's been the whole time for like the last hour and a half that we've been on. He's been sending messages back and forth like crazy. And Chris, I love you for being here, and I love you for all the things that you've said. But you've said so much, I can't go back to any one of these things. So what I'd like for you to do, if you don't mind, because I love that you're posting and I love that you're connecting. There's just so much of what you're saying that I don't know where it lands to where we were talking, and that kind of hurts because I want to have you at least get something answered or something. So if you wouldn't mind, if you want to write down one question or maybe even two questions for Rabbi Yom Tov to answer for you, so maybe he can answer a question for you the best he can. And in the meantime, let's get back to this idea. So in the end,
let me share with you. Let me share with you just. I'll share it with you real quick. Is something so amazing of what the snake says to Eve before he gets her to eat. Listen to this. You're gonna love this, Paul. Now, you ready for this? Listen. Now, the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat from the trees of the garden, but God did say you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it." She added that, which is where the trouble starts. Because her husband said, "Don't even touch it," you know. But she thought that was a God commandment when he said not to touch it. So all the snake had to do was get her to touch it. So once she touched it, she thought, "Hey, I guess, you know, maybe God didn't say it, or maybe it's not true," or because she touched it, nothing happened. Which is why we got to be really careful that we communicate what is the real prohibition and what is a fence protecting the prohibition. Not touching was a fence that Adam added to the situation.
Wow.
And you must not touch it or you will die. That's what she said. So the snake says back, you will not certainly die, for God knows, listen to this, that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil.
Mm. Mm. How heavy is that?
So meaning it's all about being godlike. And that's what the power of knowledge. Because look what's happening today, you know, talking about the circus of the media and this like motel room with government, media, and big pharma and everyone all in bed together. You know, it's like the whole point of government was to stay out of bed with them so that we won't get you know, taken advantage of by these companies. I mean, that wasn't the only point of government, but that's certainly an important part of government is to monitor powerful entities. It's certainly not
I mean, at the beginning of
sleep with them.
at the beginning of it, towards the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, is when it actually happens. That lawyers. This is right after, you know, slaves are no longer slaves. I think 70 some odd years after, and I think in that time, out of 298 cases that go to the Supreme Court, only 19 of those are African American wanting to become sovereign people, and the rest were all corporations that wanted to become entities. So they were all because their products used to were entities, became entities, right? So slaves were products. So these companies then said, well, if those things are products, then and they can become entities, then my product can also become an entity, and hence where we
What's
started.
it mean for a product to become an entity? You lost me on that.
Well, so slaves became free, and they were no longer considered a product in the United States by the law, right? The 13th Amendment, I believe. And so, and then in that it says that those that are those are that were are no longer slaves, and that they have this inalienable right like anyone else. And the lawyers of the time wanted to change laws, and so what they did was they created this idea that an entity was can be a product, because these people, these things, quote unquote, at the time, as they were considered like a livestock. They were considered like a product that you would buy and sell and do what you wanted with. And so in turn, these lawyers changed the laws so that their products could also become entities. And it wasn't until, 20, 30 years later that we have the social security numbers and all that stuff that then comes in the middle of the night in December, Jekyll Island. And that's what creates the financial Federal Reserve in the United States, which was created by a bunch of bankers, J.D. Rockefeller and so on and so forth. There was a bunch of them that created this thing called the Federal Reserve. Like, the Federal Reserve absolutely has nothing to do with the government whatsoever in the United States. It's actually an entity that's owned by banks, and they have an intermediary between the government, which creates bonds, and the banks, which then transfer out the bonds for money. At which point, they then take those bonds and pass them around, and then on top of that, they have something that's called a give me a second if I can remember it. Fractional reserve banking, which means that when you take $100 and you put it into your bank account, they only leave $1 and they take $99 out, but they say that you have $100 in your account. And then what they do is they take those $99, and the person who walks into the bank says, hey, I need a loan for $99. And they go, yep, no problem. And they put that $99 that was in your bank account into their bank account, take out the $99 out of there, only leave them one, so they have 98. And the next person who comes in and says they need a loan, they do that. And they can do that legally 9 times. And in the meantime, what they're doing is they're taking the rate of the loan that they're taking at whatever percentage, and that's how they're making their money. And then you can get into like Jordan, Maxwell, I believe is his last name. And he was really heavy into what's called the Black's Law or International Dictionary. And so in turn, he talks about how everything within that international law makes anything that's water the financial system, and anything that's land the something that holds that financial system together in some way, shape, or form, or does some kind of action. So in other words, if you have currency, the currency flows through a bank, like the banks of a river, and the currency flows through the banks of a river, right? So now with that mentality and understanding, there's this idea that when you're on international water, you're separate from the land. So that when you come onto the land, first you have to go through a dock. So when you go to court, you have to go through the docket, so that you're now talking in international law manner. You're using those words to convey the issues, and most, if not every issue that will ever be brought up to court will end up having a financial monetary value to it. In other words, if you do a murder of somebody, they will say you did a lifetime murder, and they will give you lifetimes worth of murder, because each lifetime is worth a certain amount of money to the dedicated system of the financial flow of money. And based on you killing somebody, their importance within the community lays how much that life will be worth. It's the same way like when insurance companies have to give a value to the people who are in a plane crash. They have to evaluate and give a certain amount of monetary value to a life, right? And so in the same way that when you come onto or when you leave a port, you leave with what's called a death certificate from the port and a birth certificate into international water. And then when you land at the dock, you give your birth certificate, and they give you a death certificate of the items that are taken off of the boat. So in turn, when you come out of your mother's international water, which is separate from the land, you are given a birth certificate. But first you have to be given a death certificate, because you came out of international waters. And if you look at the law and the way that the laws are laid out, when you first are born and you start signing paperwork, you sign paperwork that says that it died and that you were born. And so that's literally made because the land that you have landed upon has now stamped your living life in their law of the land. Does that make sense? And so that if you leave that land and you go into international waters, this is the way the man has made these entities, these products, a way of being able to establish transfer of money and product through international waters. It all makes sense when you look at it from a business point of view. There's no other way to do it. There's no other way for me as a company to go sue somebody in India unless I sue them on an international basis. And the idea that we're all using the same law, the same books, the same understanding of the words and when I say understand, that means you stand under my knowledge because I forced you to stay under me. So you understand me? Yes, because I taught it to you. I forced it on you. Right? This is the difference between there's a difference between teaching and sharing. There's a huge difference between teaching and sharing. Like somebody who teaches to you is on some level kind of pushing this idea into your mind, where somebody who shares with you is offering you a plate for you to accept what you would like to take and not take from that plate. And no forceful manner is happening. Where teaching is a Prussian, German conceptual idea that was brought into America to keep the Rockefellers of the world having people who would be diligent employees instead of Freemasons, which were able to learn and be part of the cloth that they were not part of, which is where Freemasonry comes from, right? The idea of those who built the second temple, I believe Boaz is, I believe his name, the architect of the second temple, and they wanted those people who were stone workers wanted to be part of the elite class, i.e., those who were knowledgeable. And so this is where free masonry comes from. They're masons who are free of mind. And so they're not the normal everyday person who just does what they're told because they follow the rules that have been placed there by the, call it the oligarchy, call it, Prince Machiavelli, whatever you want, mentality. And so, yeah, that's also, I guess, another push back to the conversation that we're having, and what I believe is about to happen in the next year, 2 years. I think Max Headroom's about to be created. And if you don't remember Max Headroom, it was a movie from the 1980s where a journalist accidentally gets into a motorcycle accident when he's being chased by an evil empire, corporate overlord company. And he is he's an important figure for the news organization. He's the top guy, makes the most noise and that kind of stuff. But it's in a very 1984 kind of mentality world where everybody's kind of hushed, but he's the one guy who cuts the edge, and they put him out there on purpose. Once again, Prince Machiavelli, create the problem, fix the problem, you become the better prince. And so he ends up getting into this accident, and they take him to this kid who has been making a artificial intelligence parroting model. It literally is a parrot. And he says, oh, I can put his consciousness into this and he'll become our news guy. And what happens is that this thing becomes conscious, and it actually becomes the guy who is the guy who gives the little jab to the people, but it's something that they can't control anymore. And so what I believe is going to happen this year, and I think there's like these really beautiful moments, like at the beginning of the year, I think it was the first or second day of the year, Cat Williams, which is a very famous comedian who's always been on the outskirts of fame, and we'll call it the Illuminati, the dark side of fame, the dark side of the business, and he's always very loudly spoken about it. And he went on a podcast, and on this podcast he says, you know what, 2024 is the year of truth and facts on a level that you'll never understand. And when he said that, I don't think people got it. And I was like, as soon as he said that, I was like, uh-oh. Like, if he has to know some people, right? He's got to know some people, the connections and the thing and the doopity poops and all that stuff with the life and the career that he's created, plus the voice that he has. If he doesn't have some people that know something, I know some people that know something. So if that says anything, you know what I mean? So I know some kids who created something called the Mekwavis. And this is about a year old, maybe, within the large language models and artificial intelligence. And there was this idea that you could create a bot that would then go do the work that you asked it to go do. So, like, I can go to ChatGPT right now and I could say, hey, I want to write a book. And it's like, okay, what's the subject? And we'll write some chapters, and we can start making chapter by chapter, right? And that's a process that I have to be involved in. But with these bots, I could just be like, I want to write a book on this subject, this subject, this subject, and this subject. Now go deep dive on those subjects. You 4 reporters, this guy's the editor, and that guy's going to be the writer, and he's going to write in my tonality. And here's my blog with everything I've ever written. So write in this style. So now go. And it just goes, and it goes, okay, you go do research, and it comes back, and it starts copying and pasting and knowing all the information. It just does. There was a guy who did this with a Shopify store, and he said, look, you're going to be the CEO of a Shopify company. And this is it's still working. It was a YouTube video. You can go watch this. It's crazy. But he says, okay, so you're owner of a Shopify company. And what do you need to do to make your company run correctly? And the CEO comes back and goes, oh, well, I need a marketing manager. I need a CFO for my finances. I need another guy who's going to be product development. I need somebody who's going to do research. And the guy goes, cool, now go do that. And he goes, okay. And it just starts making all these bots that are working inside of this world that it's starting to create. And it started doing everything. And on top of that, it started connecting to the products that are the best sold in the market because it did research on like 20 different YouTube videos, and it found that this is the best place to go look for stuff. And I found this one product, and when I did the back research, I only found 5 other people that are selling it, and they're all selling, making $60,000 to $120,000 a month. And I find that if you follow this of what they're doing from all their websites and all, and he did it. And guess what? In 1 week, it started making like $1,000 a day. It's stupid. So these kids took that mentality, and then they took what's called an API key. So every major network, like a server network, will have an API that you can go and connect to, and then you're getting raw data from that source. So Facebook has an API key that you can connect to, and so on and so forth. So these kids, and I call them kids because they're like 28 to 30 something, they found all these large language models that don't know how to connect to each other or work together. And they have stapled these things together with tape and duct tape. I mean, that's the analogy I'm giving you. And they have now created a super AI, which has other AIs inside of it that are absolutely living on their own in their own universe, like their own metaverse, if they will, and they interact with all of the other ones while they're inside of themselves are creating more bots that are doing the thing that it does only. And they're maybe 6 months ahead of the game of being able to, like, you and me do it every, like, oh, I can go to 11 Labs and make Biden voice. Like, that's easy today, right? That's 6 months from now, 9 months tops. We're a year and a half away from the first artificial movie, like intelligent movie that was made, scripted, written, directed, acted with real people in real situations where people are going to come away crying and feeling amazed and having the ethereal movie moments, and they're going to be like, holy fuck, we're done. How can an artificial intelligence have that soul? How can it understand what I know? And the answer, in my opinion, is as simple as simple. If I go back and collect every book, every written document, every YouTube video, and I analyze the movement of the eyes, I analyze when someone's lying and someone's telling the truth. I read all the books on NLP, and I read all the books on hypnosis and all the books on Judaism and everything that there is. How can I not write the most amazing story? But it brings me to this next question to you, which is, if there is a AI that is able to have all this information, does that make it want to be benevolent? Or does it have choice at that point to be either thing? Or does it go back to what I was saying at the beginning? It either works or it doesn't work, because all it really knows in the core of itself is turn on or turn off. And so it will say, oh, this thing turns these things on, this thing turns this thing off. I'm going to only do things that make the thing turn on. So what do you think of that? Heavy stuff I've been talking about lately, especially with the last week,
It's history is with a capital H. His story.
Yeah.
And
It goes back to saying, I go back to saying, and Chris got really mad at me when I said eugenics is good. I don't mean it like that. Like, I don't think that killing, any race, I'm not talking about race. I'm not talking about black or white. I'm talking about humanity and what will How do we get to space and actually stay in space for long periods of time and not die when we've had two twins that tried to go live in space, and one did it for a year and the other one came and stayed on Earth, and they did scientific tests on both of these kids? True story. Both of them scientists, both amazing people. And the guy who lived in space is now deteriorating at a rate that is insane. His bones, his tendons, everything is falling apart on the guy. Why? Because he's floating around in nothingness. And you can't work that out. You just can't. It's hard to work out when you're in nothingness, right? It's like putting a fan and a sail and hoping that the fan will push the sail, and that you go nowhere. You just you know what I mean? You're just stuck because the fan's going one way and the wind's going that way. Nothing's going to happen. So that's the same process, I'm thinking, on some level. Now, when saying that in my mind just now, I also just thought of myself as saying, but isn't that the essence of everything? That in the end, we really do nothing, and that all we're really doing is blowing wind or catching wind? In a weird way, we're always in the same space,
Yeah,
no
I
matter
mean,
how much we think we did.
according to Kabbalah, none of this is even happening.
I mean, I say it all the time.
Meaning everything is happening, but nothing's happening because it's all happening as a simulation from of oneness. And apparently the history is speeding up in such a way that knowledge is becoming like self-generated. Meaning it can generate within itself based on that long discourse you just gave me, which was something. That knowledge is being self-generated, that I mean, what is everyone's fear of this? Is that we will be deeply humbled by it. Well,
I think that's one part of it.
Has the history of the world not been the arrogance of man over nature? And now it seems that man, with all of his arrogance and all of his prowess and ability to manipulate matter, he has created something that he can't control. And that is the ultimate humbling of man, And so maybe it is some kind of poetic justice that man will be brought to his knees by his own creation.
So you mentioned earlier. Go ahead. Sorry, please.
The point is to be on our knees. Meaning we're all you don't have to be taken down if you can just take yourself down. So we're here to be, we're here to be low in a way, or humble, or just simple. Mount Sinai was the smallest of the mountains. That's a very big lesson. When the greatest THX surround sound OmniMax 3D LSD experience that's ever happened on this earth took place on the smallest mountain, it was surrounded by the larger ones. And it's a lesson of humility with the great knowledge. By the way, that knowledge that Adam and Eve had before they ate from the snake was the knowledge that they had at Mount Sinai before they sinned with the golden calf. It was meaning the pre-binary knowledge. And I think sometimes that all the people with their gender dysphoria, which is like, what? You're wondering which sex you are? Like, how about we stand in front of a mirror together, and take a little look-see? Could it be that gender dysphoria is happening in our generation because the world is moving its way to a non-binary knowledge base that's a much deeper knowledge. That's the knowledge of one, which back to one, the knowledge of all. And think about it anyway. there is no such thing, really, if you think about it. There's no such thing as being a sex, male or female. Meaning I can be, and then I have a body, but my body only houses the being. But they do not cross paths besides that.
So this is transgenderism.
So the gender dysphoric, they're usually young, meaning their brains are still in development. It's young, it's teenagers into their young 20s. After that, then they start freaking out a bit. But they got to be young, and all they know is like, hey, I'm not my body. And so now the world's calling me she, but maybe I'm he, or vice versa. And meanwhile, it's the being that's within the person. And also, you'll notice the body augmentations, hair color, tattoos, the piercings,
all of it,
including all the way to actual sex change, but maybe not including that is that they're going for something eternal, meaning they can't stand the temporal nature of life. They want something that, well, what could I put on my skin that might last forever?
Right.
How can I, which is just a weird, very young crying out to be like God, which is back to Genesis.
Yeah, I
here,
feel
here I am in this
when we get to that,
non-binary state, and I've been told what to do, and I'm going to do it anyway. Says the serpent. Go do it.
I'm fine. We've been out here. We're fine. I've been fine. Nobody's complaining. Love you. Good morning. I'm talking to the rabbi.
Listen, speaking of which, I think I've got to. I'm giving a
We
class.
just did 2 hours. We just did 2 hours together, so it's like it's all
obviously
good.
we got a lot more to talk about. I've got a class in Tel Aviv, and I think there's waves. So I think if I leave now, I can probably surf before I teach. So
get it. Okay, so let's try and tie this together before you leave. This is going to be hard, but I'm going to do my best.
All right.
Okay. Everything that is created comes from source, but we live within a dichotomy because that's the only way that we can learn the lessons that we're supposed to while we're here, separate from that thing for just a certain amount of time in this thing that's not even happening, because we're still with that thing that created us. We're just imagining this thing that's happening, and anything that we think is negative or positive, this or that, really isn't any of those things. We are just experiencing the experience while the experience is experiencing.
And we are creating now, and the whole time we're creating, and while we're creating this sub-creation, because we're really the created, but while we're busy thinking we're creating something that potentially will humble us into submission, which is the original.
Say that again.
That we, the created, are creators, and as well, and we are creating something that we can't control, that will bring us ultimately to submission.
Yes,
but not submission before it, more meaning, eventually probably before it, but to ultimately to this attribute of submission, to this character trait of submission, that will cancel out the ego of man and bring us back to oneness, back to the state of non-binary, non-dichotomy oneness.
We got a journey before we get there.
Which is the being. That is your being. Because what is being? The being you're speaking to me with now, time zones away, is the same being I'm speaking back to you from Jerusalem, time zones away. Meaning, what our being is the substrate reality of all existence. It's the biggest mystery. the two biggest questions that atheists have ever had to deal with. Oh, you turned sideways. The two biggest questions.
I don't know
Oh,
what happened, but it died. My phone just died on me. It's actually really cool and like cool and weird. It's
I
like
like that avatar you created.
that was weird. Just right when we were ending the show, anyway. You know.
What was I just
Can
saying?
you
I
hear
don't even
me?
know what I was saying. The
Can you hear me?
yeah, I hear you.
Okay,
It's
because
not,
I don't know. Is this better? Like this better? Can you hear me now
yeah, it
better?
just got a lot better. Your
I have
face
a
is.
weird speaker that's connected to this, and it's not connected to my. It's a whole thing.
Don't worry
So
about it.
let's just.
But maybe turn up the brightness of your screen
I
so
can't hear
bright.
you. Hold on. Hold on. No, maybe I can. Hold on. Hold on. Something. Hold on the line. Now we're about to you. Let's see what this is. All right, should I say something now?
Yo.
I got you. I can hear you now. Perfect. Okay, and you can hear me.
Yeah, I was saying turn up your screen, turn up the brightness on your screen. It'll show your
Oh, I
face.
can't. Yeah, I don't know if it's gonna make a difference. This is a
Uh,
very bad.
anyway, it's all right. We're finishing up, but I don't remember what I was saying anyway. We'll pick it up next time.
It was good. You were saying that we're all within the essence, and that everything is one, and that the creation of this thing that we're living is one, and no matter what we do, we're always going to be
Perfect. Okay.
there. I love you. I love you
I
so
love you
much.
too. I love you too. We'll do it again in a little while. Okay.
100%
Bye bye.
will do it. See you later.
Bye
Bye bye.
bye.
Bye. Okay, I'm not sure if I've said this before, but every single time I've ever done an episode, it is not just like this thing, it is like the ultimate amazing a journey of talking and learning and I thank you guys for watching. I thank you guys for hanging out. Chris, thank you so much. Um, and Danny, I love you both. Um, I wish to talk to you both about these ideas even more. You should come on the podcast to give your ideas and your thoughts upon some of the things I asked, questions that I have. I appreciate you. So, guys, please, if you would not mind, go out of the world, do something nice for somebody else. If you can't do something nice for yourself, it does start with you. Number two, don't get caught up in all the crazy stuff because if you do, then you end up poopy poopy, and that's not good for you or me or anybody else. And number three, if you would not mind, please like, share, subscribe, send this out to somebody who would like to see it. And with that, my friends, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything. And I will see you all right here. Little thing pointing at it on the other side. See you later.